Hello, hello, I'm Amanda with AB Adventures, and today we are going to be talking about the history of two famous carousels at the center of Fantasyland in both Magic Kingdom and Disneyland. It's going to be a really interesting video, so stick around. Welcome back, guys. So like I said, we are going to be covering the making and the history behind the Magic Kingdom carousels in both parks within the United States. So the first thing that I want to cover is what exactly makes a carousel and what's the difference between that and a merry-go-round, because a lot of people use that interchangeably and it isn't always meant to be used interchangeably. So a carousel actually goes counterclockwise while a merry-go-round goes clockwise. And then merry-go-rounds can also have all kinds of different animals. They can have different, things that you can actually ride on, but a carousel is always only horses. So that's the difference there, and that's why both of these are carousels. Now we're going to start with the one in Disneyland and actually talk about King Arthur's carousel and the history behind that one. And we're going to backtrack a lot to way before the parks were ever built. A lot of people actually know this story as the way that Walt Disney had the inspiration to start the park.
Well, it came about when my daughters were very young, and Saturday was always Daddy's Day with the two daughters. So we'd start out and try to go someplace with, different things, and I take them to the merry-go-round, and I took them different places, and as I'd sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, did all these things, sit on a bench, eating peanuts, I felt that there should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where that the parents and the children could have fun together.
And so really a carousel was kind of the start of Disneyland and Disney World and all the other parks all the way around the world. So this really holds a special place for a lot of people. So with the start of that is where we look into how we actually got to King Arthur's carousel in Disneyland, and this one was actually brought from Canada. The earliest record that we have is 1922 in Sunnyside Park in Toronto, which that was when it was not necessarily built, but that's the first record that we have of it. So Walt wanted all of these horses that came from this one. They were all different, and there were different animals and everything. They pulled those out, and he also wanted all the horses to be what they called jumpers. And so there are different kinds of horses. You can have ones that are just standing with all 4 feet on the ground, or you can have ones that have 1 foot up or 2 feet up, and those are prancers. And then the ones with all their legs up looking like they're in midair are jumpers, and Walt wanted all of them to be those, so they removed the standing legs and added jumping legs instead. They also expanded the original carousel and added more rows to it, so instead of 3 there were now 4 deep of horses. Now, out of these, every single one is designed completely uniquely from the other ones. So the ones all the way out on the front, where you can actually see them on the outside of the carousel, are the most intricately decorated, and then as you get further back to the middle, they get a little bit less decorated and also a little bit smaller too. So the ones on the outside are called the A horses, and then there's B and C and D, and then the one in Walt Disney World also has an E line too. So all of these kind of differ in how they're designed, but like I said, they're all uniquely designed and completely different from each other. And with that, every single one has its own name. So you can actually, fun fact, you can find a list of the horses' names in City Hall in Disneyland. So they will actually give you a list of them, and we'll break down a couple of those. But what's really interesting to me is Walt's wife, Lillian, actually had a favorite horse, and that horse actually, you can tell a little bit different because it has a gold tooth. And then, arguably the most famous one on this particular carousel is Jingles. And Jingles, you can tell the difference because it has all of these little metal bells going all the way down its side. Part of the reason that this one is so special is that they actually dedicated this one to Julie Andrews back when she did Mary Poppins and the dedication of Disneyland. And then later, when they actually were doing the renovations and the upkeep on a lot of these horses, they took this one down and repainted it, redid it and everything. They actually asked for Julie Andrews, not advice, but input on some of the colors that she wanted incorporated. And you can see like a little umbrella on there. There's little subtle references to Mary Poppins. And when they dedicated this again, specifically to Julie Andrews publicly, they gave her a little miniature of Jingles to be able to take home with her. So this one is super special, very popular, and again, a lot of the other ones have names too. And speaking of how all of these are upkept and taken care of over time, there is actually one person who their sole job at the parks is to take care of the carousel. So what they do is they take down each of the horses and they make sure that their paint is well done, that the brass bars are actually primed and shined and made sure that they're really, really pretty. And that takes about 6 hours every single night that they do. So with the actual bringing these horses in, they actually have 72 horses on the ride, but there are 85 in all. So what they can do is when they bring one down to actually paint it and make sure it looks pristine and everything, they can switch it out with another horse so that there's never an empty spot on the ride. Now, moving over to Florida and Walt Disney World, we see Prince Charming Regal Carrousel, and this one was actually built in 1917 and found in Michigan, and they brought it down from there, and it was what's called a Liberty Carousel with scenes from America all around the attraction. So now they've actually been replaced to Cinderella pictures, and you can see that, but they used to be this very American feeling kind of ride. They had 2 different chariots on this ride too. So when they brought it over, they expanded it again just like in Disneyland, and they had 5 rows of these horses. The ones on the outside are pristine and really intricately detailed, and they get less so as you get to the middle. But also they redid a lot of the horses and everything. They took the chariots out and they had 72 horses with the 2 chariots, and then when they had that taken off, they had 90 horses all the way around. Now, this actually a few years later, they started kind of trying to hunt down these chariots again to add them back into the ride, and it took them years upon years to find them again. They actually found them up in rafters of a warehouse somewhere, and they brought them back and reinstalled them onto the ride. So those are original to the ride as well. They just didn't have them there for a long time. Now, talking about originalness, when they first brought this ride right behind Cinderella's castle, they installed it there, and Roy O. Disney was standing behind Cinderella's castle and looking at it, and he said, I think this is a little bit off. And they went back and measured it, and they found out that it wasn't really centered. It was about a foot off. So they picked it up and moved it just a foot over to recenter it into Fantasyland, and now it is centered. And then also at the time, it was called Cinderella's Golden Carousel, and they changed the name a few years back to Prince Charming Regal Carousel, with a whole story behind it of how Prince Charming, after they got married, their world was at peace, and Prince Charming didn't have a lot of stuff to do, so he started training, and he built this contraption in his backyard essentially so that he could train on horseback, and his people saw this and he wanted to be able to gift them with a way to do this as well. So he built this circular carousel where people could get on and ride in a circle around and pretend like they were practicing for some kind of tournament. So anyway, this is the story behind it, like it or not. And this is why it is now called Prince Charming Regal Carousel. Now, when we were talking about the Disneyland Carousel and the horses there, we talked about how every single one is unique, and that is true here as well. Every single one is unique. Some of them have names. There's all kinds of different ways that you can tell the difference between them, but one big myth that we're going to debunk here is that a lot of people say that the horse with the golden ribbon on the tail is Cinderella's horse, and actually the way that this came about was there was a cast member who was trying to make a magical moment for a guest and wanted them to feel really special for riding this one horse, and it did the job, but at the same time it started a myth that has never been confirmed by any of the executives or the people taking care of this attraction, and that's the fact that this one horse with the golden ribbon on its tail is Cinderella's horse, and that is just not true. And it sounds great and beautiful, and what a wonderful story to be able to ride Cinderella's horse. It just doesn't fit the story of who Cinderella was and what kind of horse she would have on this ride. And there have been a lot of really popular books out there who have said that this is the truth, and when you actually look at people who work for the carousel and have been for years and who are entrenched in Disney history, they will say that this is not true. So as sad as it is that that's not Cinderella's horse, hopefully that clears up any confusion. If you are ever wondering why anybody would choose that as Cinderella's horse, that is why, because they didn't. So anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified in the future. And we will see you all on the flip-flop.